Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today the Cincinnati Bengals may be wasting an all-time great season from Joe Burrow. So Sunday night, as you guys know, Bengals fall to the Chargers 34-27, a game in which the Chargers were dominating in the first half. The Bengals storm back in the second half, tie it up. We have some McPherson missed field goals, and then we got J.K. Dobbins running in for a touchdown with less than a minute left, and the Chargers defeat the Bengals by one score. And this is the sixth one-score loss for the Cincinnati Bengals this year. And all of them, to a degree, have kind of come in different fashions in a way where it's like you have the first one where there's like that's the no offense game where you only score 10 points against the New England Patriots. Then you had the next game against the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Kansas City Chiefs kind of do their Chiefs thing with how they win their games. You have the next game, which was the no defensive game and the no punt game for Cincinnati, where the Commanders end up, having like the great Terry McLaurin touchdown pass to end that game. Then you have the overtime loss against the Ravens, where you miss the field goal in that game, and then you end up getting killed by the Eagles. That's the other loss, and then you lose the 1-point game last week against the Ravens on Thursday Night Football, and then we obviously have this Chargers loss. And just kind of getting into the macro picture of the Cincinnati Bengals here, I kind of thought heading into the season that I thought the offense was going to be the thing holding this team back. And 2 weeks in, when the Bengals were terrible against the Patriots, and then we had water bottle gate in week 2, I kind of thought that Joe Burrow's wrist wasn't right. And the fact that I wasn't that confident in the offensive line, which I still think I'm right on, because you look at the Pro Football Focus grades for the offensive line, it's still not that good, even though the wide receivers and their situation with kind of the contracts going on there, I thought losing Joe Mixon was going to be a big loss, even though it looks like Chase Brown is like a really good weapon in the Cincinnati offense now. So I was wrong on the offense being the team holding, or being the thing that holds this team back. It's obviously the defense and the kicking for the most part, and we can get into some Zach Taylor stuff here towards the end. But Joe Burrow, since that, water bottle gate thing, has been either the best quarterback in the NFL, if not one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, because if you just look at him statistically, he has 27 touchdowns, which is first in the NFL right now. He's leading the NFL in total yards, passing yards, and he is on pace to have career seasons as far as it goes for passing touchdowns and passing yards. And just to kind of put into perspective how good Joe Burrow has been this season, and there's like some crazy numbers that I'm going to go ahead and just share with you guys right here. So here's this first one: most losses in any NFL season despite throwing for 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns. Blake Bortles had 4 in 2014. Drew Brees had 4 in 2016. This year, Joe Burrow, with 6 games remaining, has 4 and counting. The other ones are from other previous years, obviously, down there. So that's kind of a stunning statistic there. I have more. There have been 19 instances this season where a QB threw for at least 250 yards and 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. Here's what the win-loss record looks like for those QBs. Joe Burrow, 0-3. All other quarterbacks, 14-2. Burrow has more losses than all other quarterbacks combined. I got more for you. Let's compare this Burrow season. This one compares this Burrow season to some historical seasons that we've seen other quarterbacks have. So NFL Triple Crown winners led NFL in completions, yards, and touchdowns. Joe Burrow, 2024. That is, if the season ends today. You got a Brady season, 2021, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Warren Moon, Dan Marino, Dan Fouts, Roman Gabriel. I didn't go back and check all of them, all of those teams for the Triple Crown thing and how well their teams did, but I'm guessing most of them made the playoffs, if not, did not win the NFL MVP. I got more for you. Joe Burrow in the Bengals' 7 losses. He has a completion percentage of 67%, passing yards per game, 308 yards per game, 18 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, a passer rating of 107.6, and his EPA on dropbacks is plus 59.6. And I got another one. This is another one comparing his season to other great quarterback seasons. Through the first 11 games on the 4-7 Bengals, Joe Burrow has 3,028 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Players to achieve 3,000 plus passing yards, 27 plus touchdowns, and 5 or fewer interceptions through the first 11 games, along with their team's final records. Tom Brady, 2007 and 2015. 2007, obviously the 16-0 season. 2015, they went 13-3. Aaron Rodgers in 2011 and 2020, his teams went 15-1 and 13-3. Patrick Mahomes in 2020, 14-2. Drew Brees in 2018, 13-3. All of those teams were one seeds, if not Super Bowl contenders. Yeah. I can't remember what year the Brady, that 2015 one, they won the Super Bowl, but I think the rest of them obviously did not win Super Bowls. So those are all there are just a lot of stats to kind of point out how good Joe Burrow has been in a lot of these games. And there's also the thing too, you have to consider, what if Joe Burrow actually did have a problem with his wrist that was persisting throughout the entire season? I know he's kind of listed on like the injury report a lot of times with that wrist, but it doesn't seem like when he's playing it bothers him at all. So like what would have happened if he actually did kind of have a rocky season this year? How bad could this season have been for the Cincinnati Bengals? And it kind of comes to question here when you're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and you're looking at their future, because if you're Cincinnati, you don't want to do a thing where what you did with other players in the past. You obviously had Carson Palmer, who was a very good player, didn't necessarily set him up that much for greatness. I think Joe Burrow is a lot better than Carson Palmer, and you're kind of in a situation here with Cincinnati where, okay, how do we set this guy up for greatness? Because you're past the rookie contract stage of Joe Burrow. You're paying him a bunch of money right now, and all of a sudden, all these other awesome draft picks that you had want money too. I doubt you're going to be able to keep T. Higgins off of this franchise tag. This team does seem like they play a lot differently when he is in the lineup. It's almost like having two number one wide receivers, and there's not much other players that you can consistently rely on in the pass game other than Jamar Chase. I'm looking at this Bengals team, and this is where I want Cincinnati Bengals fans to comment in the chat, because I'm very curious what you guys think of Zach Taylor right now, because there are some Zach Taylor stats that are kind of eyebrow raising, especially when you're comparing them to your peers here. Let me see if I can find this one here. So this is a stat here that I found on Twitter. Zach Taylor and Matt LaFleur got head coaching jobs in 2019. LaFleur has 20 more wins. Kevin Stefanski was hired a year later and has 2 fewer wins than Zach Taylor. Dan Campbell has 20 fewer games than Zach Taylor, but is only 4 games back in wins. He is the problem, period. That's obviously an opinion there. I want to hear your guys' opinion in the chat. I got another one here for you guys here too. This is one specifically that really hurts when we were talking at the beginning of this episode about one score losses. Watch this. Look at this stat here, guys. Look at this chart here. So this is something that's kind of going viral Sunday on Twitter. Active NFL head coach records in one score games. So you can see up here, Kevin O'Connell, Nick Sirianni, DeMeco Ryans, Jim Harbaugh, Matt LaFleur, Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay, some pretty good head coaches up there. And then we go all the way down to the bottom. Who do we got at the bottom here? Well, Matt Eberflus, wow, terrible. Right above him there, old Zach Taylor, 21-32. I can't remember. Let's see what was the time. So this was even before the ending of the Sunday night game. So I think that makes his record now 21-33 in one score games. But you kind of just look at the other guys that are around here. Todd Bowles, Doug Peterson, a lot of coaches that there's not too many coaches, but even if you look at some of these guys, they have like, they're closer to like 500 than let's say a Zach Taylor is. So, hey man, this is something with Zach Taylor where when he got hired by Cincinnati when it was the stage in the NFL that was hey, anyone that's ever had a cup of coffee with Sean McVay gets a head coaching job. And Zach Taylor was kind of like the number one case study of like, what the heck's going on here? This guy was like the quarterback's coach with the Rams, and now all of a sudden this guy is going to become a head coach of the Bengals. Well, the first year, when you get to some of those winning stats there with Zach Taylor, I do think he deserves some benefit of the doubt with some of that stuff, because the first year wasn't with Joe Burrow. The second year he had Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow ends up tearing his ACL. Last year, obviously, Joe Burrow ended up like missing most or a good chunk of the season with a wrist injury. So it's not all like been 100% like, he hasn't had like 100% a great situation every single time he has been the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals here. But you're looking at this team here, and the offense is good. The defense is bad. The offensive line is kind of meh. The weapons are good, and you're getting to a point here where you're going to kind of have to, with players on huge contracts, just the way the NFL works, you have to have good coaches that are able to win in the margins. And right now, just looking at some of those close game losses with Zach Taylor, I'm skeptical that he is going to be able to be a guy that does that to the level that Cincinnati Bengals fans want, and even someone like Joe Burrow wants. And this is kind of the problem that you have with the Cincinnati Bengals, though. And this is kind of what I was really shocked about when I was skeptical of the Bengals before the season. I had a bunch of Bengals people coming at me and were like defending the organization, like kind of, shockingly to me, because I've always thought the Cincinnati Bengals were an organization that was cheap, that and not even just cheap with their players, but cheap with their facilities. They were loyal to a fault with Marvin Lewis, where he was there for like so long. Like they probably could have fired him 7 or 8 years before they actually did. And that's kind of the concerning part here, because if you do think Zach Taylor is the problem, just with the history of the Cincinnati Bengals and how they treat their coaches, I think he's going to get a lot of shots here. I could be wrong, but just the history of how this Bengals organization has conducted itself, I don't think Zach Taylor is on the hot seat. I think he probably should be, but I don't know. But that's where I need Cincinnati Bengals fans. I know a decent amount of you are probably going to be tuning into this that probably never watched this show before, so please subscribe if you could. We'd appreciate that. Tell me what you think of Zach Taylor. Should he get fired? What blame does he hold in this situation? And one, would you fire him? And then two, do you think he will get fired? Because I think that's a completely, different. Those are two different conversations of, do you think he should get fired or will he? Because I think if this was another organization and this is the kind of stuff that was going on, someone's going to be held accountable for it, and it would be the head coach. So there you have it, guys. Like I said, leave comments on all of that stuff pertaining the problems with the Cincinnati Bengals this year. Now, actually, I will leave you guys with this, though. There is still a chance that the Cincinnati Bengals could make the playoffs. They are the 10 seed right now. I believe the Broncos are the 7th seed. It's only like a 2-game difference. And if you look at the Bengals' schedule headed down the stretch, we have Pittsburgh off of a bye. You have at Dallas. Dak Prescott's no longer there. That should be an easy W. At the Titans, that should be an easy W. Cleveland Browns, shells of themselves. I think that should be a W. Broncos. Now, the Broncos, like we said, could be a playoff team, but I still don't think that's like this avalanche that you guys have to climb. Pittsburgh Steelers to end the season. It's not crazy that Cincinnati could go 5-1 in these last 6 games, go 9-8, and then potentially be the scariest 7 seed in NFL history since we've had the 7 seed in the playoffs. I think that's actually a path there for Cincinnati, and you'd like to think maybe there is a remedy of maybe you do start figuring out how to win some of these close games. Maybe the defense does get a little bit better, and maybe you figure out ways to just manage the games better down the stretch. I'm hoping that for Cincinnati. I want to see them in the playoffs. They're one of the most fun teams in the NFL, even if they have been losing, even though Cincinnati Bengals fans don't like them losing. But there is still a path for them to make the playoffs, and I would not be surprised if they're the 7th seed, and we're talking about them being like the scariest 7 seed ever for like whether that be whoever has the 2 seed. That'd be the Chiefs, the Ravens, or I guess it could be the Steelers too, or the Bills. So there you have it. That's going to do it for this episode here today. Like I said, leave your comments on what you think are the biggest problems with the Cincinnati Bengals. What do you think about Zach Taylor and his hot seat? Will he get fired? Will they keep him? Should he get fired? Love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. So thank you very much for watching. If you got this far into the video, please hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. That is the number one thing that you can do to help support a small channel like this. It costs you absolutely $0 and it helps this channel grow. Please leave that like button if you enjoyed this video, and feel free to check out other Sports Detective Podcast videos on this channel. Thank you very much for watching. We'll talk to you next time.